I don't think I've ever gone from, oh, this is cute, to seething salty rage as fast as I did with Let It Die. That being said, the game is fun. The game is a mathematically effective loop of self-rewarding actions whose feedback creates a way to fast forward into the future without making your life any richer or more interesting. I hate this game so much. For those who don't know, Let It Die is the latest comedy violence slasher game from aging punk rocker Suda51, but this time this kind of middle-tier production with top-tier charm is free to play, but in a way that hasn't exactly garnered it a lot of negative press. Reviews and discussion seem to paint it between being only okay to being pretty fun because the whole thing is set up to be a disposable experience that normal people should disregard as soon as they notice the repetition set in. But I'm not a normal person, so I gave an honest effort to beat the video game past the point of diminishing returns without having to pay for it. I can't say I didn't expect this outcome, but my net experience has not been a positive one. If you were to make a graph of my enjoyment of this game, it would look like this. Kind of a rough start until I learned just what's so adorably cute about this game that it makes me want to pinch its cheeks, to a scathing tragedy as I saw this beloved tough but fair bait-and-wait Dark Souls hack-and-slash combat get used for a game that's not meant to be overcome and won. Instead, Let It Die is a game that's meant to be endured. It's meant to be a monotonous daily grind, and somehow, I think that's going to be your experience whether you buy its microtransactions or not. Somehow, I have a feeling that the game's core loop is just not good game design, not directly because it's free to play, but rather because it was designed in a way to stave off accusations of it being pay to win. When you look at a lot of discussion of this game, you'll see players report on a kind of in-game soft paywall getting tossed around. There are a few specific known choke points where you don't have to pay to keep going, but a lot of players agree that certain mid-game bosses are gonna make you feel pretty darn encouraged to. And eventually, the only real way around that, as with so many free-to-play games before, is by going down a road that'll have you spending tens, if not hundreds of hours grinding. For me, this started at floor 16 of the game's roguelite procedural dungeon tower. The problem reared its ugly head again at floor 23. I've played in the mid-40 hours, and I'm pretty sure that half of that time was spent not making any real progress at all. I've never played a whole lot of free-to-play games because of the assumption that if they're supported by in-game payments, that the design of that game will have to be compromised in some way, and Let It Die falls right into their pile. It's not exactly challenging the stereotype when it's built in a way to only seem generous up front before compromising everything later on for a small volume of large value purchases. And what I think is the most offensive is that the game's combat balance got the axe hard for the sake of those sweet, sweet microtransactions. Let It Die's primary microtransaction purchase are the death medals, 50-cent tokens that instantly revive players consequence-free right on the spot, which is a neat little thematic spin on the game's arcade setting meta-narrative, but the real-world consequences of charging players 50 cents per death means that it's designed like a mean old bastard of a quarter muncher. Except unlike arcade quarter munchers, players can start this one up and get going for free. But in order for Suda's team to be making their money, they gotta make sure that players die a lot. Remember that less than 1% of free-to-play players of the mobile games that inspire these business models actually end up supporting these businesses. I have a feeling that Let It Die's whales may be a higher percentile, but it still depends on having a divisive spread of players. Players who are much more dedicated than normal people are going to end up spending money on this thing, which is why I think you don't feel that roadblock until hours upon hours in, and for me that started at floor 16. The boss here makes a perfect example of what worried me about the game's stiff animations and oppressive stunlock in earlier levels. She can sneak in an incredibly overpowering special attack in there that does like 5 to 8 times more damage than her normals. You really want to avoid this huge gore beam, and there's not a lot you can do to see it coming. Unlike her regular attacks, this big heavy special attack has a faster and quieter wind-up period that's only noticeable if you see these red lines within the 1 second beforehand, which you're probably not going to see since she's spraying projectiles all over the place, necessitating that you turn away from her and run for cover. She has no cooldown for that special attack either. She can burst fire off like 3 of them in a round if she wants to. There's no audio cue for it. There's no big dramatic wind-up period for it. It is breaking the archetype of video game combat rules. And it's also an anomaly in an otherwise fair moveset that actually makes her kind of a pushover boss, to be honest. And that's because she's a quarter muncher. Getting hit by this one particular beam after getting a whole lot of good hits in is when you're supposed to be putting in your death metal. But there is a cheaper way to solve that problem. It doesn't cost money, but it sure takes a lot of time doing the same stuff over and over again, which is to play the whole game over again, making a new character and leveling up from the beginning, because the later hours of Let It Die just turn combat into a numbers game of which combatant has the higher level. It's not about skill, it's about not having a lower level character on the floors where the game doesn't want you to have a lower level character, and it lets you know where by killing you, unless you pay up. This stuff sneaks up on you. Most enemy AIs are such a pushover that you won't really notice how far you are out of your safety zone until just one errant lethal blow lands. The level scaling of this game calculates damage in such vast increments that a level 50 character up against this boss can't take just one gore beam. They get one-shotted. A level 54 character, on the other hand, sure can take that hit, but getting 4 levels past 50 requires a whole new playthrough with whole new problems that I'll get into later. Until then, leveling your dude up just 4 points higher makes a night and day difference, but it's gonna take you hours because you can only raise your level cap by straight up starting over with fresh characters, which you're gonna have to do. And this is what I think is a big difference between Let It Die and the Souls games everyone compares it to. It is possible to do a Soul Level 1 run from Dark Souls. It's really hard but doable, but in Let It Die, the later bosses have so much HP and deal so much damage that I don't think it's possible to do this game with a level 1 guy. The bosses get to a point of such sheer, overpowering statistical depravity that players can spend upwards of $24 per boss getting through, which they still don't necessarily have to, because the most oppressive economy in the world technically prevents this game from being pay to win. This game's economy is a wishy-washy mess of conflicting transactions juggled between like 4 different kinds of currencies. As it turns out, players have discovered that death metals are actually probably best not used as intended. They're not an economically rational way to recover from the consequences of dying. Passing over the soft level floor that keeps you from dealing chip damage with a whole new character is. I tested this out by rerunning the floor 20 fight. This level 50 girl lasted pretty long. I dodged more attacks smarter, I hit the boss more often, and survived longer with her until I just couldn't last anymore after about 10 minutes than I did with a level 67 girl who really stumbled her way into just powering through it, and that took her about 6 minutes instead. Once you level past an ambiguous soft level requirement, you can get away with a lot of stupid mistakes, because Let It Die doesn't see game difficulty as a physiological challenge of timing and judgment. It sees it as an economic issue of the player choosing to spend either time or money to pass over these bosses. And this is an issue that I think is going to give everyone a bad time, whether they pay up or not. At later floors, at 23 and up, bosses are buffed to such a ridiculous degree that looking up any guides for them on YouTube will probably have you watching videos of people exploiting the hell out of the game's most unbalanced equipment. But to even get there and get that equipment, you still have to do hours of repetitive grinding, both to create new characters who can pass the new floor's leveling requirements, and to get lucky enough for the game to spawn in the increasingly rarer crafting supplies, the increasingly specific healing and buff items, and the constant drip feed of equipment drops needed to replace your constantly breaking arsenal. Crafting, in particular, is why it's not actually a good idea to be spending your death metals on revives. Despite what seems to be their purpose as an arcade game metaphor, using death metals as quarters is not actually what they're good for. The grand twist of Let It Die's modern free-to-play learnings that betray its quarter-munching arcade inspirations is that death metals are actually yet another versatile currency that is probably better spent expanding storage space and saving money on elevator rides, because the coins that this girl takes to bring you back to life also make more storage space, like, bore out of the bottom of this freezer in the basement somehow. So let's say you play the game optimally and economically. You don't buy any death metals, you only use the tiny bit they give you for free for storage space upgrades. You'd have to go back a few times and make new characters to diligently level them up, despite dealing with an enemy type they throw in now called haters. These guys are based off of other online players' loadouts and leveling configurations, and their max level is the maximum potential level of your highest tier fighter that you could possibly reach, even if you're not playing as them, even if you never reach that cap. This is largely determined by how high you've ever made it up to the top of the tower, even when you're wallowing in a replay grind at lower levels of the tower with lower level characters, which has the ironic effect of increasing that soft level requirement further down into lower level areas as you play the game. High level haters can roam low level areas of the tower, which slaps yet another ridiculously overpowered one-shotting enemy to get you to see this screen, even in places where your stats are much more evenly matched up for the area you're in. Getting one-shot killed by haters makes replaying the game feel progressively more punishing, to the point where you can go straight broke back to zilch quite easily just because of haters. But even if you grind past them, even if you pay past them, you're still eventually going to be up against a grind you can't skip, one that the death metal payments won't help out with. The grind for the crafting ingredients necessary to survive those later floors is why I think trying to genuinely enjoy this game as a dedicated fan is ultimately a lost cause. It's the perfect example of this kind of exploitation, the perfect example of the heartless, repetitive, glassy-eyed, play-by-checklist game design style that is so pervasive these days. After playing the same levels over and over again, hearing the same audio clips over and over again, clicking through the same overly long menu animations again and again and again, I really had to wonder why I kept doing this. Because I did, I just kept it. I've played like 40-something hours of this game. And it's because of the arithmetic. A steady drip feed of numbers and a satisfying thud of a drop kick of dopamine was always bringing me closer to feeling that soon I'll overcome whatever infuriating roadblock I was getting stuck at. But there's something to be said of how they hide this. The dev team would have to hook people to get them to spend money on this game, right? And they totally had me hooked for a while, even though I didn't spend money. But I think now I'm at the point where it's just going to be diminishing returns if I continue to not. But when you start it up for the first time, you're experiencing something like a free trial without the grind or the financial temptations. A good 10 hours of game where you're unlocking a steady stream of story beats and new content, and then all of that just suddenly stops. Which is why I feel wishy-washy about hating so hard on a game that starts strong at the low price of nothing. How much should I really be hating on something that's still 10 hours of good fun for free? I think my problem is that what's in store after those 10 hours is a massive undertaking of a grind. And at that point, when you feel that repetition set in, you can safely just let it go. Get some kicks out of this game early on, and then just throw it away. Which may just be another part of the grand aesthetic theme behind it all. Maybe that struggle is the point, to get really hooked on something that's bad for you and ultimately decide to just let it die.